Awesome. Hello and welcome to this June 8th meeting of the Essex Region Source Protection Committee. So before we get started, we start with a land acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge that the land that we're on in the Essex region is a traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. And we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of our past as we continue to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation. And as I like to do with these meetings, in the spirit of a teachings from an Indigenous leader, I like to start with a statement of gratitude and hope. So as always, I'm very grateful that we get to be here together. And I really hope that I'm able to make this interesting for you guys as we start to slog our way through the different policy conversations. So Tom, I'll hand it over to you now to call the meeting to order.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie. And welcome everyone. In terms of calling to order, we do have quorum. We have 8 members present visibly, and we have 4 members here by proxy. In terms of chair's welcome, I simply wanted to let you know that by the book, my appointment as chair of this committee is up in August, about the 3rd week in August. I can't remember the exact date, but it doesn't matter really. And I was asked by the province if I'd like to reapply, and I thought about it, and finally I said yes, I would. The process, as those of you who have been around for a while at least, is very procedural, and the minister gets involved, and ministers' seconds get involved in terms of deciding who to appoint, going over lists of applicants for it and so on. So because of the election, it's possible that the appointments won't be made by the time my term expires. So there may be a period of time. Well, first of all, I may not get reappointed, so that's a given. And secondly, if I'm not, there will be no chair for some period of time after my term expires until a new chair is appointed. In that event, there is a process for the committee to elect a replacement chair or temporary chair for the period of time until a permanent one is appointed. That would happen at the first meeting after that, which I think the agenda talks about September, October. At that meeting, Katie's going to talk to you about the process later on. But at that meeting, a permanent or a temporary chair will be appointed, and unlike before, it won't be just for that meeting, be appointed for the duration of the time when there isn't a permanent chair appointed. So someone would take over and do what I do until the minister decides who's going to be appointed. And as I said, it may be that they'll come up with, they've been sort of behind before when there wasn't an election involved. So it's quite possible that you will be in that situation where you'll have to vote on an acting chair, temporary acting chair. And that's really all I have to let you know about. We have submitted our documents to the province as we're required to do. We submitted them to the Source Protection Board, also known as Conservation Authority membership, and they have forwarded them to the province on our behalf. So that work is done, and thank you very much. I didn't really see any comments in terms of my comments, so I must have done a good job. I'll take that as a notion that I did a good job on. So with that, is there any declaration of interest? that anybody needs to make tonight? None? That's good. We still have a quorum. Your agenda was pre-circulated. Motion to approve the agenda. Chris, supported by Mr. Drummond. Thank you, Jim. All in favor? Thank you. Minutes were pre-circulated from our last meeting in March. Any addition, deletion, correction, comment on the minutes? Motion on the minutes? Tim and Albert? All in favor? Carried. This is going quickly. That's good. You're going to have lots of time, Katie. The Source Protection Authority minutes were circulated as well for information. So motion to receive those. Albert and Kevin. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. No correspondence. Is Catherine with us? Yeah, there she is. Yes. Catherine, welcome. And I see that there's no update. You're still under the order of the writ, I suppose. So.
Yeah, not really so much anymore, but regardless, there are no updates from the ministry right now. So okay. Nice and short, more time for Katie.
Yeah, that's, we got to give Katie lots of time. There's no presentations other than the presentation of the reports, which follows. So, Katie, 1, 2, 3, go.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, go. I have to press a couple buttons.
George?
George.
Oh. I'll bring it up in the meeting. Huh? Good idea. Have a good night.
Okay. I always have to press a few different buttons before I can get going here. Okay, cool. Should be able to see my slide. Yeah. Okay. So just going to walk us through the various reports. So we're into now our Section 36 work, into that technical work that's going to go into updating the source protection plan and the assessment report and our policies and all of that other fun work that we get to do now. So the reports that are before you today are all policy amendments or additions or changes to bring our policies into line with the 2021 Director Technical Rules and the changes that were made to the table of drinking water threats. So I did all of the background work, cross-referencing various pieces of regulations and talking to the ministry, and did all of that stuff so that I can try to not bore you with it and just get down to the actual nuts and bolts of what we need to talk about. So the first report is very simple, but I just wanted to kind of bring it to your attention that we are obligated as we do this stuff to bring all of our documents into compliance with the Ontario Accessibility for Ontarians and with Disabilities Act, or AODA. So in doing that, I'm looking at our documents and trying to figure out, you know, are these things actually compliant? Could they be read by a screen reader if they needed to be? And our policies don't meet that. They're currently in a tabular form, which is very challenging for a screen reader to read. So I just had to come up with a new format for our policies. So try to just kind of make that as simple as possible. I also found with our policies, there was some redundancy built into them. The land use was in every policy. There's a rationale statement in every policy. So trying to find ways to simplify the document so that it's a little bit more readable and pull all those various elements together and just kind of make it a little bit cleaner. So I can't remember now what pages of your agenda they're on, but there's the old template, just a blank old template and a blank new template. So that's what all of our policies are going to look like going forward. The rationale statements, when the committee originally made our policies, the decision made by this committee, and I think it was a good one, was to make the policies kind of standalone documents so that when somebody's reading the policy, they know why they're reading that policy. as opposed to having to cross-reference to an additional document to find that rationale statement. So that's why they were written the way that they were in the first place, but it does create a lot of redundancy. So I'm trying to create a single rationale statement for similar policies. And then once we've done that, I'll take a look and say, does it make sense to put these after, 3 or 4 policies, or does it make sense to kind of put them together as one document? So that's part of the work that I'm doing as I'm going through the different policies. And then if you may or may not recall, because it's been a little bit since we talked about this, we also had for each policy an accompanying monitoring policy that said that the implementing body was to report on the implementation of that policy. And we decided back in 2020 that we would instead take out those individual monitoring policies and create 5 monitoring policies that are just directed to the implementing body to report back to us on all of their policies. So those are some of the simplifications that I'm trying to put into place. And already I'm already taking out like half of the pages that were there before. So I think that we're making some good progress on making it a little bit more readable and accessible. So the resolution just before you for this one is just to accept for information. If there's any questions or concerns or anything, we can chat about that too. Tom, you are muted if you speak.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
I just noticed that. Questions or comments? Motion? The motion is to receive the report for information. Ron and John. Barrett and Barnett. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Katie?
Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to get into the policy stuff. And this is where it's like, oh man, this is hard to make it exciting for you, but I'm going to try, I guess. So fuel policies, we've talked about our fuel policies a number of different times. This one is very simple. They've just changed it. Instead of having separate circumstances for the handling of fuel and the storage of fuel, it's now the handling and storage of fuel. So this is just an editorial change to most of our policies. So that's pretty easy and straightforward. The one thing that I did want to look at, and sorry, that's sort of pointing out the last change that happened in 2017 was reducing the volume threshold in Windsor, Lakeshore, and Amherstburg IPZ1. But we already talked about that back a few years ago. The one policy that I did notice with our fuel policy that I'd like to make a change to is the policy that calls for having an inventory of fuel tanks. And it's a very well-meaning policy, and it's something that we already do. So that policy is directed at IRCA to create an inventory of fuel tanks. What I'm proposing is one of 2 options, that we either change the implementing body to the risk management official and change the policy text that they maintain the inventory of fuel storage sites, because this is something that the risk management official already has to do. And IRCA supports that under the risk management office. So it's not IRCA doing it, it's the risk management office that's creating this inventory of fuel tanks. The other part of that policy was that IRCA provide information for emergency plans, but that's captured under a different policy. So I'm suggesting we can take that out. The other option for that policy 41 is to remove it altogether, because the risk management official does it anyway as part of their work. So that's open for a bit of discussion. If we want to have that discussion, if we want to keep that policy, then I would change the implementing body to the risk management official, where we can remove it. And then again, in that report, I also discussed the transportation policies. So those are where we had identified as a local threat the transportation of any sort of dangerous substance. So there's 2 policies for that. There's the road sign policy that's directed at municipal MTO. And that one's just edited to reflect that there's already work that's been done towards that. And then there's the policy that directs IRCA to provide maps and such to various emergency responders. So that policy's there. Those texts are just edited into the new format. So the resolution on this one is that, and this is going to be the resolution for all of the policies, is that you guys as the SPC approve my proposed amended policies. They become part of the package that I send to the Ministry of Environment for early engagement once all the policies are completed. So if we want to have a little bit of, if anybody has any strong opinions about that inventory policy, I would welcome that conversation. Tim? Oh, you're still muted, Tim.
Tim? You need to unmute.
There you go. Nope.
Do you have a recommendation, Katie, as to which policy would be preferable?
Truthfully, I don't think it's necessary to have the policy because the risk management official is already doing that. But if it's something that the committee wants to see still in there as something that they feel is important, that they want to have it there, then I would just direct it at the risk management official since they're already doing it.
I guess I'm following up on that a little bit, Katie. Is a notion that I had was, how does it get into our annual report? The fact that that inventory is complete, has been updated, is current, blah, 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 that kind of
That's
thing.
true. It's not currently part of the annual report. It's not one of the, well, it is in that the risk management in the part 4 like separate report that we put together that really goes to like the number of fuel tanks that have been addressed and you know where the risk management, which municipalities the risk management plans are in. We don't ever post a map in there, but we have all of that information.
Yeah, I'm just thinking though that having a catalog of that is kind of fundamental to that process. And if it hasn't been in a position to be reported on, maybe it should be, you know. I'm not sure. I'm
happy to keep it in. I would just change the implementing body on it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Seeing none, the SPC approved the proposed amended policies. We'd probably do one right at the end of all this, couldn't we? Anyway, as amended or as discussion provided.
As
There's
discussed.
gonna be a change to that one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Moved by Ron, seconded by Tim. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Lisa, on that resolution, can you just add in a phrase of as discussed? Awesome. So moving into the next report, this one is about hauled sewage. So again, here, like I went through some definitions to make sure I knew what I was talking about when I brought this to you guys. So hauled sewage is, it's human body waste, except for in a sewage system. So something that's already, you know, a municipal sewage system that has an ECA on it, or in a vehicle holding tank. I had conversations with colleagues at the ministry, and the guidance documents confirm that the definition of hauled sewage does not include on-site septic tanks or septic systems. So we're not talking about the sewage where it's produced, we're talking about where it's moved to. So the application of hauled sewage is something that's already in our source protection plan. We already have policies for it. The activity is subject to environmental compliance approvals that are administered by the Ministry of Environment. The change that's been made to the Director of Technical Rules is strictly editorial on this one. The current policy prohibits the activity in Windsor IPZ 1 and 2, Lakeshore IPZ 1 and Amherstburg IPZ 1. When the ministry has given us their reports, their annual reports, they have a screening system in place, right, to find new threats, and they have not identified any significant drinking water threats that fall under this category. So there are still no existing, and there have been no new threats as it applies to the application of hauled sewage. We haven't seen any concerns raised with implementation of this policy by the ministry. So the policy for the application of hauled sewage has simply been edited to reflect the change in language for the circumstance. The storage of hauled sewage, this is a newly identified significant threat circumstance in the same vulnerable areas. So the definition of that is the hauled sewage stored in a tank or in a lagoon on site in a stationary means of containment for hauled sewage. Again, this is not referring to on-site septic tanks. Those fall under something else. Again, the activity is subject to an environmental compliance approval administered by the Ministry of Environment. So we need to write a new policy for this one because it's a new threat circumstance and we do not currently have a policy for it. The new policy that we write will be a prescribed instrument policy. So it will be directed to the Ministry of the Environment so that they are using their environmental compliance approvals for this activity. So what the SPC needs to decide is whether that policy prohibits this activity or manages the activity. And I've already engaged Albert and Kevin and Antonetta as our municipal representatives. I gave them a heads up that this was coming so that we could have this conversation with them as sort of those folks in our municipalities that can tell us whether or not this is even an allowable activity in this area. Antonetta couldn't be here tonight. She did email me and let me know that this is not an allowable activity in Amherstburg IPZ 1, and she would be comfortable with supporting the activity being prohibited there. So once we have that discussion and decide on prohibit or manage, then I will write a new policy and bring it to you. Albert.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. In Lakeshore, it's not allowed as well. But I know right now we're going through something with, without mentioning names, that I guess the company bought a new an old trailer park, and they had some kind of a lagoon with a septic.
Oh.
And it doesn't get treated to go into where you could do a treatment and it could run off into a creek or something.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hauling that stuff now. I believe it's going to Windsor. Obviously, we can't take it here. We don't have the capacity. But it's supposed to be quite the haul because they're hauling like $15,000 a day, I believe, last time I heard.
Goodness. Wow. Okay.
So it's going to Windsor, but like I say, we don't accept any of that in the municipality here. But I mean, like, that's a private thing, but it's still on the roads, right? Hauling.
Yeah. Okay, for sure. So and the Lakeshore IPZ 1 is very small, to remind people that it's basically just the marina that's there. So as long as there's no storage of hauled sewage there, which I'd assume there would not be.
Right.
Kevin, were you able to dig into anything on your end?
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get through your set of maps, and the city of Windsor did not incorporate the maps that you had sent them to incorporate into our system. So they said, oh, yeah, so I won't have access to that till tomorrow, unfortunately. But you talk about, we're still talking about the storage of?
The storage of hauled sewage.
Okay, because, I mean, I'm, until I actually see the locations, I really don't know. It's not fair for me to say that we have currently any stored hauled waste.
Okay.
I don't know if this policy needs to address, so you say not septic and septic systems, but what about RV vehicles that are hauling their waste?
No, it does specifically in the definition. It exempts waste in a vehicle holding tank.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah.
because that's one of the concerns. We've actually,
Yeah.
we're changing, we used to accept RVs on site, but we're actually going to stop accepting them as well. So I don't know what that will look like in terms of fallout. I do know there still are campgrounds that they are able to go to and dump their waste.
Right.
And the campground takes care of it, but as far as, at this moment in time, I don't know of any stored hauled waste around the IPC 1 and 2 in Windsor. So until I get the maps tomorrow, hopefully I can certainly follow up right away and let you know.
Okay. Sounds good. And yeah, to your question about the RV, when I was digging into this myself, that's exactly what I was thinking about was, gosh, are there any of these places where we might have that, and how do we even begin to think about prohibiting or managing that under those circumstances? But I think we don't need to worry about that. One of the other things that we've done in the past as well is that we can prohibit it in Amherstburg IPZ1 and Lakeshore IPZ1, knowing that that's not an activity that's allowed there. So and that's normally been the direction of this SPC, is that we only prohibit activities that are not currently known to exist and are very unlikely to exist in the future. That's usually been the direction. So that's also an option that we can prohibit there and manage in Windsor. I will welcome any other conversation, but I think I will hold off on writing a policy until we get a little bit more information from Windsor to find out if that's an allowable activity already. But if there's any other comments or suggestions or anything from the SPC, I would welcome them.
I had one idea that came to mind in terms of, we kind of dismissed the marina because why would they have any? Boats do have heads in them.
Yep.
They have pump out.
Mm-hmm.
They pump it into some kind of temporary storage, I would think. So we need to examine that, I think, a little bit in terms of storage sewage.
Yeah, maybe Albert, if you could help me find out whether that's something that the marina does.
Oh, for sure. I could give Frank a call tomorrow and ask him if they have an on-site, some kind of decantering or whatever they do with their wastewater.
Okay.
Yeah, because a boat would be in there for a whole season, so they're not pulling them out to drain them, right? They got to be pumping them somewhere. So there probably is something close to that site. So I'll find out what it is. I apologize for not having the information on hand here, but.
No, I didn't even think of that. Thank you, Tom. That didn't even occur to me.
I was thinking more of with all this stuff going on, like with these little parks getting caught and no place to go. I know, like when we go to a farmer's field to aerate to get rid of the BODs and all that, the oxygen dissolves. But that's under a C of A. I mean, you can't just have a regular guy make a deal with a farmer and then start spreading out these trenches of sewage.
Yeah. Yeah, it would still be, no matter what we do here, the activity is managed by an environmental compliance approval. So it would still be up to the province to either make sure that the ECA ensures that the activity doesn't become a threat to drinking water or prohibits it through their ECA process. So our decision as the SPC is only to decide whether the activity is prohibited or managed.
Okay.
And the way that we decide that is, is it something that already occurs? If it's something that's already occurring, then we usually choose to manage it because.
Yes. So right now we're just prohibiting it, right? So we're not even in the managing.
Yeah. Okay. Ron.
I've got a question. Where do the residential septic tank pumpers dispose their loads of sewage? Where's that happening?
I don't know. Kevin.
Kevin? Can't hear you, Kevin.
Yeah, the city of Windsor, not Little River Pollution Control Plan, but Luramano, we do have probably a dozen approved waste haulers that are allowed to come to our plant and are allowed to dump into our system. They obviously pay for it, but and the only way we can control what they're putting in is we do base testing on some of them, just so our plant manager knows what's coming into the system. The volumes are not huge in that sense from those waste haulers, but as Albert was talking about, the pond that they're draining currently supersedes the volumes that are coming in from the waste haulers. So yeah, we do accept them. We do have the right to control the amount that we accept, but we really haven't turned that many people away. So we do give them a place to dump it properly.
Okay, thank you.
We had trouble with that once, not here, but back up north in Timmins, Little Park as well. And they were supposed to bring it to a provided manhole close to the system because we wanted to test it before it went in, because it would throw the whole plant offline, right?
Okay. Thanks for that question.
So do you have a revised recommendation on this one? Or?
Yeah, so the resolution that I wrote in there is approving the amended policies. Maybe Lisa, we can change it to approve the proposed amended policy for the application of hauled sewage. And then the following resolution still stands, that I prepare a new policy for the storage of hauled sewage to be presented to the SPC. So I still need to do that anyway, pending this conversation and asking a couple of additional questions.
Can you tell me what page those are on?
Oh, can I? Good question. I also have multiple screens going. That report starts on page 36.
Oh, maybe it's 36.
So
Right on the first page of the report.
oh yes, it's on the first page of the report and at the end of the report. So it's on page 36 and
I beat you to it.
and page 38.
Okay. So there's a recommendation, two-stage recommendation there. Anybody want to move it? Nelson? Albert? All in favor? Carried. All right.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so the next report is about industrial effluent. So again, that definition of wastewater system that's discharged to surface water or land and has as its primary function the collection, transmission, or treatment of industrial sewage. So this is, again, is a significant drinking water threat in the same vulnerable areas: Windsor IPZ1, Lakeshore, Amherstburg IPZ1, and Windsor IPZ2. This committee, when the policy was originally written, they separated it out into industrial waste, except for non-contact cooling water. And non-contact cooling water is exactly what it sounds like. It's just water that runs past a pipe to help cool things down. So it never comes into contact with any chemical waste. It's just water. So there's a policy for non-contact cooling water and a policy for other waste. The waste is prohibited in these areas, and the non-contact cooling water is currently managed in these areas. Again, this activity is subject to an environmental compliance approval that's administered by the Ministry of Environment. So these are prescribed instrument policies. The reason we went with prohibit is that the activity is precluded by land use designations in Windsor IPZ1 and Lakeshore IPZ1. And the City of Windsor has bylaws that prohibit discharge to sewers. So we know that that activity is not allowed to happen in those areas. The previous policy had a bit of a caveat for Amherstburg IPZ1 that any current activity could be managed, but future activities would be prohibited. So in, again, looking at the province's reports to us, the province has not reported any of these existing threats. So we can feel comfortable knowing that there are no existing threats that meet these criteria in Amherstburg IPZ 1. So I'm suggesting we just remove that clause and just have a prohibit policy for all of the IPZs for industrial effluent.
You're
And
kind
again,
of, you're kind of fading off, Mike, there.
Am I fading?
Sorry.
No, I don't even know which
You
one of my
you turn your head to look at the monitor.
at the screen. I don't even know which one of my microphones I'm currently using. There's several around the screen. Sorry, did you catch that? So there have been no identified existing threats in that Amherstburg IPZ 1. So we don't need that clause to manage existing threats because we don't have any. So we can just take that clause out of the policy to simplify it. And then I've just left in the policy to monitor or to manage the non-contact pooling water the way that it was, and just amended those policies so that they match the wording now in the new version of the Director of Technical Rules, but the intent remains exactly the same. So that's what happened with the industrial effluent policies. Are there any discussion?
Question, anyone? Kevin?
Who, I mean, I know this is written by SPC, but who enforces this?
This would be the province.
And the province would come down and fine them accordingly? If unknown to the city or whatever?
Yeah, so I think, yes. So they would have an environmental compliance approval that's required for this activity. So the province would review that existing environmental compliance approval to say, do we feel like all of the protections are in place that need to be in order to stop this thing from being a threat to drinking water. When they do their compliance visits for their ECA, if they find that that industry or whatever is out of compliance with their ECA, they would be fined by the province.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Katie, does that appear in their year-end report? Or is it just a blanket? We've monitored it properly or something?
I think it would be. I haven't had that. That hasn't happened for us, but I think, yeah, I think it's in there. Catherine, you may know better than I do about that, because we have like 5 new things identified every year, and it's, they're all municipal fuel tanks kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would be reported to you. You mean our compliance efforts when environmental officers do inspections and what the findings are? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that's the question.
Yeah, I don't know if that gets reported in this type of annual reporting. I'm not sure. I can find out.
Sure.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? So the recommendation is that the SPC approve the proposed amended policy to be submitted to the MECP for early engagement. Is that the one? Okay. Moved by Albert, seconded by Chris. All in favor? Thank you.
Okay, so this one was rather hilarious. And I'll tell you why it was hilarious, because I wasn't sure how quickly we would move through things, but I have time to tell you my funny story about this one. So this report is about non-agricultural source material and processed organic waste. So the definition of non-agricultural source material, as I've come to now through a lot of homework and conversation, find out is by definition, it means that it is material applied to agricultural land. So it's material that's produced off of a farm. So it's things like processed food waste, leaf litter, manure from non-farm animals, anything that's kind of created off of a farm that's applied to a farm for the purpose of adding nutrients. And that activity requires a nutrient management plan that is administered by OMAF. There's also 3 categories to NASM. There's category 1, 2, and 3. Category 2 and 3 require this nutrient management plan. Category 1 doesn't. So my question to our partner at the ministry was, what exactly is category 1? And do I need to write a risk management plan for it if it doesn't need a nutrient management plan? And what category 1 is non-farm, the material from non-farm herbivorous animals. I did not know what a non-farm herbivorous animal was. So we had a very long and hilarious conversation about what that might be. And as it turns out, it's not people collecting deer poop in the forest and putting it in their garden. That is not what it is. It's the manure produced at a zoo. So cool. So the end result to all of this is that we don't need NASM policies. And the result, I spent an entire day figuring that out for you. So because the land where it is considered a significant drinking water threat is all zoned non-agricultural, we do not need to have these policies. So we can put that in our rationale statement that these policies are not required. And we had previously run into a problem with our NASM policies. You may recall that we updated them through a Section 51 editorial change to switch it from being directed at OMAFRA to being directed to the Ministry of Environment. So where that comes into play is with processed organic waste. So processed organic waste is now considered its own category as a threat circumstance, where previously it sort of fell under NASM and was very confusing. So processed organic waste is a similar material as NASM applied to non-agricultural land. So it's the same sort of stuff, but has a different name because it's not applied to a farm. And it means because it's not applied to a farm, it's not OMAFRA that's in charge of managing it, it's the Ministry of Environment. So I basically just took our NASM policies and updated them with the language to make them match the new language for processed organic waste, to make sure that the ministry is now the implementing body, that it's all very clear as to what this means. The category 3 NASM, I should have written it in here somewhere, is basically it's the byproducts from a meat processing plant. So it still is something very specific. So again, this is a prescribed instrument policy directed at the province to make sure that the environmental compliance approvals ensure that the activity does not become a threat to our sources of drinking water. The intent of the policies that we had already written and included in our plan do not change. We prohibited the activity in those IPZ1s and we managed it in the IPZ2. Again, the province has not reported any current or new, any existing or new threats through their reporting process. So the policy is working the way that it is. So the policies have been amended to match the 2021 table of drinking water threats. I also, we previously had 4 policies. We had a policy for Windsor IPZ2 for handling and another policy for storage. And then we had a policy for handling in the IPZ1s and a policy for storage. Because these are all directed to the Ministry of Environment, I put the handling and storage into one policy. So again, just to simplify and make it easier to read, the province, when they do their early engagement, will tell me whether or not I'm not allowed to do that. But I'm going to try to do that just to make the policies shorter and easier to read. And they all also had a rationale statement. So instead, there's one rationale statement. So that's my story about poop.
I have a question. Is there anything that would apply in our area under this that's applied to non-agricultural lands?
This processed organic waste?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. The province, like in the provinces reporting back to us, they have not, this has not happened.
Okay. Because like I say, any that I know of in the county is applied to agricultural land.
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah. And again, it's the good news for us is because our intakes are in the Great Lakes and they're far out and they're deep, it means that the land area where things are considered a significant drinking water threat is quite small. So sometimes this can feel a little bit like make work because we're following a very prescribed set of rules. So and sometimes it's kind of challenging to say, well, this is never going to happen here, but we still have to have policy for it.
Any other questions?
That makes sense. Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Seeing no other question? The,
I think John is frozen. He looks frozen.
I'm sorry?
I think John Burnett is frozen.
Oh, John, where is he? There he is. Oh. Had to happen to one of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Just glad it isn't me. So the recommended motion is that the SPC approve proposed amended policies as Katie just described. Be submitted to the MECP for early engagement. Moved by Jim Drummond, supported by Chris Smith. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I think Tim might be not noticed too. Anyway.
No, I see Tim moving.
Oh. There he is. Okay, so that's all the report.
Yep.
No new business unless somebody has some. Seeing none. Other business. Katie, you have a couple of things?
I do have a couple of different things to just sort of chat with you guys about. As Tom mentioned, the potential for having to elect an acting chair if we need to at our next meeting. So you'll see the date for the next meeting is either September or October. Sort of depends on how much technical work I get done over the summer, if I'm ready to present that to you in September or October. If I push it to October, if that means that Tom's appointment might be done, then I might do that, and then we don't have to worry about this. If for whatever reason Tom's appointment hasn't come through by the time we have our next meeting, what I will do, the process is in our terms of reference. I run an election where I say, who is willing to sit as the acting chair, and then we call a vote, and everybody submits their vote. I think if we have to do it online or in person, it's supposed to be done by secret ballot, so we will figure that out. So just to give you that heads up, and so when that happens, the acting chair is one of the Source Protection Committee members. That committee member becomes the chair and is no longer a voting member of the committee. So we lose a member of quorum when that happens. Tom is allowed to come and sit at the meeting and hear about what we talk about, as he would be a member of the public at that point. So he would be more than welcome to still come and be at the meeting. But Tom would also not be a voting member of the SPC. So that's just something to keep in mind. I hope we don't have to do that, but that's the process that we'll follow if we need to. Any questions at all on that?
Anybody?
The next thing I wanted to bring up is, as the world is sort of opening up and people are moving back to their in-person meetings. I know the BRCA board is going back to their in-person meetings. I want to kind of prepare you guys that's probably in the wind for us as well. I would welcome you to send me a private message if you want, if you have any concerns about that, where that is, is helpful for me to know if you have health concerns, if you have, any other sort of concern about meeting in person. That will help me figure out what technologies I need to have available so that we can continue to have people joining us both virtually and in person. I am a fan of making these meetings accessible. So I know Tom would like you to be there in person, but I know that for some people is, may not be an option. So just if you, I'll maybe have Lisa send in an email out, and maybe you can just provide a response, whether you're comfortable or not comfortable, if you have any particular concerns, and then we'll go from there. But again, I would, if you have any questions or comments at this point, I would welcome you to toss those out now too.
As an incentive, I hear Larry is buying pizza.
Yeah. I hear we're not even allowed to have coffee in the office. I don't know what's going on there. Okay. On the same vein, as Lisa and I were trying to figure out if we had quorum today, when we send out the calendar invite, if you can respond to the calendar invite, that would be really helpful, because that's how we track acceptance and declines and that sort of thing, and then get ourselves set up to make sure that we have enough people carrying proxies. So just a reminder to hit that accept button when we send out those calendar invitations, or to let us know if you can't make it. The Windsor IPZ2. So what I brought to you today, even though it was like, oh gosh, this is a lot of reports about policies, and I did a lot of homework in the background, and I'm impressed that we made it through quickly on this stuff. The next set of stuff is going to be a little bit more challenging, because there are additional threats that are being identified for Windsor IPZ2. So I need to have a conversation with city representatives to sort of say, you know, do these things even happen? What does this look like? So just kind of wanted to give you guys a heads up that that's part of what our next conversations are going to be about, is, you know, what is identified in Windsor IPZ2 as a threat. We have an option with the IPZ2 to give it 2 different scores. So if that makes sense, we can say, well, this area is far away from the intake and it has a different sort of landscape, and so we can reduce the vulnerability score there, and then things wouldn't be a significant threat. But we don't want to do that just because it's making less work for ourselves. It needs to make sense to do that. So that's just to kind of get your brains ready for it. That's one of the conversations that we're going to have. And then, yeah, the section 36 work, I'm just going to keep on plugging through. I have a very aggressive plan for myself for this year, and I'm a bit of a one-woman show, so it's going to be exciting, I think, and we're just going to keep going. The plan is to have this stuff done and through you guys through this year, so that have the package out for consultation in early 2023. That's the plan. We'll see if I make it and if you make it. And the last thing I want to mention is that I'm making a plan. I've got a plan for making my next source water video. This one's going to be probably just featuring myself and our risk management officials, talking about what it means to make a risk management plan. So just sort of giving people an idea of what's involved with that and who you might be talking to when you make a risk management plan. So stay tuned for that in the summer months. So those are the items I had in my other business.
Okay. Thanks very much, Kate. Is there any question or comment on any of that? Okay, see nothing. We've reached, I think, the end of our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, Tim?
I am awake for this, Mr. Chairman. So moved.
Moved by Tim, motion to adjourn. All right. Supported by Ron. All right. Good. Thank you very much. Good meeting.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Good work, Katie, as usual.
Thank you.
Good job, Kate. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. See you guys later.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
See you, Ron.
See ya.
Or John, still frozen.
Yeah.